All right, can everybody see PowerPoint?
Yep.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Cheeseman. I'm policy manager here with Prosperity Indiana. And Andrew, do you want to come off mic and just say hello real quick?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Bradley, Senior Director of Policy and Strategy with Prosperity Indiana. Thank you so much for joining us here. And even in advance, big hand to Rachel for putting together this webinar and for Gwen to joining us.
Yes, and thank you all so much for being here today. This webinar is Practical Ways Your Nonprofit Can Promote Voting This Election. We are joined by Gwen Stembridge, the Director of Education and Partnerships with an organization called Nonprofit Vote. And before we get into the content, I want to do just a little bit of webinar startup, housekeeping, and a few announcements from Prosperity Indiana. I'm going to move through those pretty quickly, though, so we have as much time as possible to hear from Gwen and ask her questions, and then also just bounce ideas off of each other as we prepare to promote voting in the upcoming midterms. So a quick overview of Prosperity Indiana, if you are unfamiliar. We are the statewide association of community economic development. Our members include nonprofit organizations, private individuals. When we say public organizations, we're talking about city housing authorities. Sometimes members of different city departments will join, and also private organizations like banks and foundations. Our goal is to promote economic opportunity, housing affordability, housing stability, and consumer protection, and to, in general, just build the community economic development ecosystem. So we want our members and our partners to feel that they have the tools they need, the information they need to make the impact in their communities that they want to have. And that part of that is our advocacy work and encouraging civic participation through things like promoting voting in elections. So yes, when we are together, we are stronger. The reason we are a statewide association is because we believe that when we come together, we are better equipped and more effective in achieving our goals for our communities at the community level, but also on the statewide level. And lastly, I want to thank United Way of Greater Cincinnati. They have generously supported the content of this program. So we want to give them a big shout out. They have decided to invest in advocacy in the tri-state area around Cincinnati. So they are supporting some great work here in Indiana, also in our neighboring states in Ohio and Kentucky. So I'm going to do some quick housekeeping. I'm going to mention some opportunities to connect and engage with Prosperity Indiana that are coming up pretty quick here, and then also some active action opportunities that you can take. And then we will start to hear from Gwen, and then we will close with some questions and discussions before we wrap up for the day. So our next webinar is going to be July 13th, which is this coming Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. And this one's going to be all about crypto and why it matters, even if you don't own it. The guest presenter for that will be Tananson Carmona from the Brookings Institution. She's going to be talking about consumer protection, scams and fraud. Crypto scams are a very, very big threat, especially to a lot of consumers who might not be very familiar with what crypto is. They might not know the warning signs ahead of being scammed, and they are losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and that is heartbreaking. And she'll also be talking about crypto's impact on the marketplace. I do not purchase digital assets. And so I like to think that I am impacted from the volatility that they can have on the broader market, but I am not. And Tananson Carmona is going to tell me all about it so I can get good and scared about it. We are also in the midst of our regional meeting schedule. So there's the full schedule there. If you would like to join us in person, we will be in Gary, New Albany, South Bend, Lafayette, and Indianapolis. We have wrapped up our meetings in Evansville and Fort Wayne. So if you're in those areas, we sure hope we saw you. And then upcoming, we also have a discussion group for the book There Is No Place for Us by Brian Goldstone. It has recently won the Pulitzer Prize. So if you would be interested to read that book, you can get it from your library, or Brian Goldstone has made some pretty serious efforts to make the ebook very low cost so folks can access the material. And if you would like to read that before August 28th and join us for a brief discussion, you can let us know to do that. When you sign up, it will ask if you would prefer a morning, afternoon, or evening time, and then we'll kind of figure out the final time based on what will work best for the most people who want to participate. We also have some current action items that you can take if your nonprofit organization would be impacted by some of the changes that have been proposed to federal grant making. You can submit a public comment on that either as an individual or as an organization by July 13th. If you have questions about that process, email me, and Andrew and I will kind of triage your questions and answer them as best we can. Last I checked, there were about 80,000 comments. So the federal government is hearing from people, and we think that's good. And we want them to hear from you as well. The other current action item we have is the appropriations process is underway. And so we are hoping that folks will contact their lawmakers and emphasize the importance of continuing and stable investments in critical HUD programs like eviction prevention, housing choice vouchers, housing counseling, continuum of care programs, and community development block grants. If you have any questions about what those are, or if you never called your lawmaker before and you want help finding the phone number or figuring out what to say, I am happy to help with that. And I am just an email away. The QR codes on these pages will take you directly to our Action Center where you can complete those. And if all of that sounds super fun and you're like, I want to know about stuff like that all the time, then you should absolutely join Prosperity Indiana's network and our various coalitions. Prosperity Indiana is, again, that kind of community economic development sector level advocacy. The Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition focuses specifically on housing affordability, stability, other investments in housing stabilization, and homeless services. And then the Assets and Opportunity Network focuses on policies related to economic opportunity. If you would like to learn a little bit more about what's involved in joining a coalition, you can follow that link and book a time with me on my calendar, and we can talk face-to-face over Teams. I moved through that really fast, but that is because I wanted to make sure we had as much time as possible to hear from Gwen. So I'm going to pass the mic to Gwen, and thank you so much for leading us. I will be your slide advancer from here on out, and I thank you so much for leading this presentation.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to this time with you all. Please do ask questions, or parts of this can be a little interactive. I might ask some questions. You can respond in the chat. There will be some time at the end, though, definitely for questions, and I'll get to things in the chat as I'm able to. Ready for the next slide. So wanted to just give you a little overview of what my time with you will look like. Wanted to give you just an overview of who Nonprofit Vote is, in case you're not familiar. I'll talk with you about our Nonprofit Power Report, which I think is a really cool tool you can have in your hands for advocating to do this work. Then we'll really talk through the do's and don'ts of nonprofit, nonpartisan voter engagement. Again, all of this that we are doing is nonpartisan. Everything that I'll be talking about today, these are all activities that you can do in a nonpartisan and C3 safe way. And then we'll talk about some examples of those activities and kind of get brainstorming a little bit. And this is where I would love your input as well and your ideas. And then I've got a work plan, just a planning template for you to share that you can use as you're thinking through what your voter engagement plan is going to be for this year. And it is not too late to get started. So this will really help guide you, though, through the questions, through all the things you need to think about. We've been doing this work for 20 years, and so we've got a really good sense of it. And then we'll have some Q&A, and we'll wrap up our time. Next slide. So Nonprofit Vote has been around this year for 20 years. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary. And during that time, we have been supporting nonprofits to do voter engagement with the communities that they serve. And we know that when the communities that nonprofits are serving are participating in our democracy, it is a stronger and a more inclusive democracy. The more people show up to vote and participate in our democracy, the more inclusive and the more representative of our actual country it will be. So that's a little bit about our mission and vision. Ready for the next one. And what that looks like practically is that we have a free voter engagement resource library. So tools ranging from, a list of nonpartisan activities that you can do. We've got timelines where if you want to do a candidate forum, there's some guides on there. There's even sample emails. If your executive director, your CEO wants to send an email to staff about voter registration, we've got sample emails for you, trying to make this as easy as possible. So that's some examples of things that are in our free resource library. We also have a free national webinar series. The one we had most recently was about creative approaches to arts integration. Integration into voter engagement work. And we had Warm Cookies of the Revolution and Americans for the Arts. Super fun group there. The next webinar that we have coming up at the end of the month is on elections and safety. So please do join us for that coming up. All of our webinars are recorded and they're on our YouTube channel and on our website. We also on our website have research-based partner case studies. So if you're thinking about doing this voter engagement work, but you're not sure where to start, there are case studies and examples and stories of organizations that have done this before. And this is organizations ranging from food pantries to health clinics to youth serving organizations and housing organizations. It really varies, but we tried to give those examples of how this has worked at different organizations to just get your brainstorming flowing. And then we also have a nonprofit vote blog. And lately, that blog has featured a lot of explanations about some of the policies that are coming from the federal level and also mostly from the federal level, but explaining some of the policies, some of the judicial decisions that have come down that are impacting nonprofits doing voter engagement. So some explainers on the SAVE Act, some explainers on the OMB rule that Rachel mentioned earlier. So some explainers, and really that's a really great resource for that. And then we also offer customized trainings for your organization, kind of like we're doing here. So there's a range of different topics we can cover, and I'm excited to do that with you. And then lastly, we are the managing partner for National Voter Registration Day. If that is not on your calendar yet, it is September 15th, and we encourage you to sign up as a community partner. It is completely free to sign up as a community partner, and you get lots of benefits. You get posters and swag, and tools and resources to do voter registration, to do an event on that day or sometime around that day. Next slide. So this is the report I was telling you about that could be really helpful for you in advocating for doing this voter engagement work. So this Nonprofit Power report we completed a couple of years ago based on some work that we do in states with state anchors. And we found that voters engaged by nonprofits are 10 percentage points more likely to actually show up and vote. So that means you all, nonprofit leaders, when you do voter engagement, when you integrate it into the work that you're already doing, those voters that you impact are 10 percentage points more likely to show up and actually follow through and vote. Next slide, please. So the reason one of the reasons that's really significant is that a lot of times nonprofits are serving communities that have been left out or have kind of fallen through the cracks of our systems. Just maybe show of hands, or you can put a yes in the chat. How many of you all get an obnoxious amount of text messages during election season? I am one of those. Yeah, I'm on all the lists, right? Yes. Okay. I'm seeing the thumbs up, the hands. Yes. Just so many, because I'm on whatever lists I'm on, right? I am a likely voter. I have been marked as a likely voter because I have a very consistent voting record. And so campaigns get that information. And then they are able to reach out to me. Campaigns usually partisan campaigns that are really interested in making sure that I vote for their candidate. And so they are motivated to make sure that I have the information that I need to show up and vote. So my polling place and, who's on the ballot and all that kind of stuff. They're very motivated in that. If I had not voted in the past, if I didn't have for whatever reason, if it was lack of trust in the system, if it was that I was in some way, historically excluded from that process, if I moved around a lot and my address had changed, if I had been homeless for a little while, if, any number of things that come into someone's life, they might not be on those types of lists. And so they might not be getting that same kind of information from campaigns that are really motivated to see people vote for who they want to. And so I might not be getting that information. So if I'm not getting that information from campaigns, where am I getting that information from if I were even to vote, right? So this is the self-perpetuating loop. People don't vote, and then they are labeled as unlikely voters because the public information that exists is whether or not someone voted. It is not public who you voted for, but it is public information whether or not you voted. So organizations are able to get those lists, and you're labeled either as a likely voter or an unlikely voter. And so campaigns are not going to spend their time reaching out to unlikely voters if they're not, going to vote for their candidate. But nonprofits are able to just blanketly say, hey, we want everyone to vote and everyone to show up because we're not vying for any particular candidate. And we're able to really change that system so that voters get the information, or potential voters get the information that they need to actually show up and vote. So that's where you all as nonprofit leaders are really powerful and can really change this system so that it is more inclusive and we can get more folks showing up to vote. Next slide, please. So this is, the reason that nonprofits are able to do this is because of the trust that is built. Often you all as nonprofit leaders, you speak the language of your communities, both literally and figuratively, speak the language of your communities. And so you're able to build that trust with those communities. You've got deep roots there. You may be, location based. You may have seen generations of families, come through your organization. And so that relationship and that trust, as opposed to a campaign that might come in a couple of months before election day. Nonprofits are there all the time, and we are there in our communities able to build that trust. Next slide, please. This is some of the data that you can see. In a minute, I'm going to share another QR code. You'll be full of QR codes and links by the time you leave here, which is good. You'll have lots of resources. But this is some of the data that is in the Nonprofit Power report. And just in general here, what the bar chart is showing is the difference in low propensity voters, so that like 0 to 30%, or 0 to 30, those are the numbers that folks are marked, a low propensity or a high propensity voter. Among low propensity voters, nonprofits are really making a really big difference. Voters that are contacted by nonprofits are much more likely to actually show up and vote. And so then separately, don't try to make the bullet points and the bar chart go with each other. It's two separate pieces of data we put together, but those numbers really increase even above the 10 percentage points when you just isolate those that are earning between $20,000 and $30,000, so lower income individuals and families, 14 percentage points for young voters, and then 12 percentage points for voters of color. So really makes that difference. We want to be sure again that it is not just folks with a lot of money that are making all of our decisions for our democracy, right? We want young people showing up. We want to make sure that there are lower income folks that have a voice, and folks of color and all of that. Next slide, please. So this is your link. I can also put this link in the chat to the Nonprofit Power Report. We have found that a lot of organizations find this helpful in advocating for doing this work. So if you're newer to this voter engagement work, please do use this as a resource to advocate for doing this work. Next slide, please. As we move into the next portion of the training here, I want to be sure I remind you that I am not an attorney and no part of this presentation should be interpreted as legal advice. We'll talk a little bit about just guidance and do's and don'ts, but should not be interpreted as legal advice. If you have specific questions about, what your organization is doing or should be doing, I really encourage you to seek legal counsel, but also you have a wonderful resource in Prosperity, Indiana, but also We Love Alliance for Justice and Boulder Advocacy. They have an attorney line that you can call for help there as well. Next slide. So next, we're going to talk about some of these examples of what we might even consider when we're talking about nonpartisan voter engagement. I'm curious to hear from y'all in the chat. If you do voter engagement, maybe just a little example of something that you do, like do you register voters or do you, or are you not doing anything? We'd just love to hear in the chat if there are some examples of things that you all are already doing, or if you're not doing that, just to get a sense. And you can just put a yes or a no. That's okay too. We find that some organizations are really engaged and are doing this work already, and then we find that there's other organizations that have been a little hesitant and are maybe trying to figure out what would be practical for them to do. Oh, great! Folks are sharing here, having discussions with young people about how to vote. That's great. Election Tuesdays, post on social media. That's great. Love that. And on Tuesdays kind of gets that date in people's minds. I love that. Not currently doing anything. That's okay. Glad you're here. Had a group come in to do voter reg one year, but only got a few people registered. That's okay. One person registered is one more person registered. So there's no shame in starting small. And League of Women Voters, a variety of things depending on the election year. Yeah, great. We love the League. We work with the League on the national level too. Okay, not currently doing anything. Yes, and that Turbo Vote link. Great. Yes. Okay, awesome. So we've got a mix of different things. I just wanted to get a sense of that. Ready for the next slide, Rachel? So a couple things. I'm first going to just get out of the way all of the things that you cannot do as a 501c3 nonpartisan organization. And then I'll be able to share a much longer list and many more slides about the things that you are able to do. But wanted to start here just to get make all of this clear. So 501c3 organizations must remain nonpartisan. So that means that you cannot endorse or oppose a candidate or political party, either explicitly or implicitly. So sometimes folks will say, oh, I really like the color red, or some kind of implicit, implying that they support a certain party. But it's really important that you really stay nonpartisan and don't either explicitly or implicitly support a candidate or a party. You also cannot donate money or resources to a candidate or party. And resources would include things like, sending out an email to your list. That is a resource that you have. If you're sending out something in your e-news or something like that, you're not able to do that in support of a certain candidate or party. Also, just conducting any partisan election related activities. So if a candidate comes to your organization and says, I want to do this, event with you and you're going to support my campaign or something like that, you're just going to have to say a no thanks to that one. And then the last slide on here, I think it may have gotten just a little bit cut off, which is okay, because I'll just tell you what it is just a friendly reminder about not being able to give out prizes or incentives in exchange for registering people to vote. What you are able to do is give out, for instance, if you're giving out pizza at your event, you can give pizza to anyone who attends. What you cannot do is require that they register to vote in exchange for pizza, right? That's the difference there. Offer it, if you're offering prizes or incentives, offer that to everyone. Ready for the next slide. Now we're going to talk about things that you are able to do as a nonprofit. And I've separated these out into really smaller capacity activities, medium capacity activities, and larger capacity activities. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed or feel like this is going to require way too much, and so I shouldn't even start. There are plenty of activities that you can do that are small, and even if you are a volunteer-run organization or a really small capacity, you are able to do this work. So here are some examples. You can add key election dates and deadlines to your organizational calendar. That is something that you can do when you sign off of this webinar, right? You can add that, make sure that your organization is planning around some of those key dates and deadlines. You're all going to want to add National Voter Registration Day to your calendars. I know, September 15th. So that's one of them you can add, but also, what is the registration deadline? What is election day? Some of those basics so that your organization can begin to plan around those. You can also email staff, board, and volunteers about voting options. And by voting options, I don't necessarily mean who to vote for, but I mean how they can vote. Are they a senior? Can they do mail-in voting? What are the laws in Indiana? And get a sense of those. And then just get that information, get those deadlines out there, and let folks know, are they able to vote early? How do they find out where their polling place is? How do they find out just any of that information? How do they get a sample ballot? You can send out information to your staff or board or volunteers about those voting options. You can also amplify your local or state Board of Elections information. I have found that my local Board of Elections, they have a Facebook page, and it doesn't get very much interaction, but an organization could very easily amplify that information or share the Board of Elections website. And that is going to be a nonpartisan, trusted resource that is really going right to the source to get that information to communities. So you can amplify that, repost or whatever you want to from that, share that information. You can print something out, put it at your front desk if you have, a lobby and people signing in. Lots of options there. You can also add a voter registration checkpoint to any intake or sign up process that you already have. If someone is coming to your office to, sign up for a Section 8 housing voucher, you can have as part of the intake process that there's a voter registration form, or there's information, there's a QR code that goes to the website so that they can check their voter registration. You can include that alongside the intake that you're already doing. Be sure that you're, following HIPAA laws if that applies to you, and all of that with information, being careful with that information. But you can have that side by side and do those checks there. You can also provide and promote key voting dates and deadlines via posters in your lobby or someplace else that's visible, right? What are those deadlines? What are those requirements? Yeah, Rachel, thanks for putting that in there about vote by mail, that kind of information. If somebody just turned 65, then, they may not have voted by mail before. And so this might be a great resource for them. Next slide. We'll go to the medium capacity activities. So some examples, you could partner with a nonpartisan voter organization to table in the lobby or at an event with you. I think somebody mentioned partnering with the League of Women Voters. There are league chapters in many, many counties across the United States, and I'm sure there are plenty in Indiana. Sometimes all you have to do is call and ask them, and they will show up. You don't actually have to do any other work other than just coordinate with them to get them to your event or in your lobby, and they will take it from there. So partnering with organizations like that can be a really easy step to take. Some other ideas that are on here, I've seen folks hold mock elections to raise awareness about the upcoming elections. You can vote for, best cookie or best music genre or just something to make it fun and engaging. I think often voting gets associated with a little bit of tension. We are a divided country in many ways, but we all care about making our country the best that it can be for as many people as possible. And so finding that common ground can be really valuable there. And you can hold those mock elections, kind of raise that awareness. You can also host local organizations to talk about topics related to the election. So maybe there's a former legislator or some policy experts. Prosperity Indiana is definitely doing this, hosting speakers about issues that are relevant to this. You all as nonprofits can do that as well. And then you could do something like print bookmarks or business cards with some of those key election dates and deadlines, something that is tangible that people can, pick up really quickly at a table, or use as a bookmark for your summer reading, or whatever makes sense for you all. You can also provide rides to the polls. This is something that not a lot of organizations think about. If you have a bus or access to volunteers who drive, then you can provide rides to the polls for those who are not able to get there in another way. So lots of options there. And our friend Sophia Petrillo from the Golden Girls is encouraging us to do that as well. Ready for the next one. And then larger capacity activities. If you are ready to just woohoo, ready to go, then here are some larger capacity activities you can do, but that are still doable. There is still time to do this between now and November. You can host a local candidate forum in partnership with other nonpartisan organizations. So some of you on this call, I know there's a fair amount of housing organizations. You all might want to get together and host a candidate forum on housing issues, on affordable housing. This is relevant to just about every state and just about every community. Affordable housing is a really important topic right now. You all could get together and partner and do a candidate forum on that. You could also invite candidates to tour your organization, your project site, or invite them to come to a community event. There's guidance about how to do that. You want to make sure that you're doing that equally with all candidates, the same communication, the same invites, the same opportunities. And we've got some guidance about that and some tools in our resource library for that. But just know that that is an option. You can invite candidates to come learn more about your work. One of those candidates is going to end up being elected. And so you'll want that person to know about the organization that you're a part of and the work that you're doing and your mission so that they are more informed in whatever elected position they're serving in. Another idea is organizing an intergenerational conversation about the importance of voting. We've seen lots of engagement this year by people wanting to engage younger people in voting. And we've seen just a turn in some younger folks that are less interested in voting. And so perhaps offering some of that intergenerational conversation and wisdom could be valuable if you have access to those different generations. You can also incorporate civics education throughout the year, not just near the election. So you can have a trivia night. You can make sure that there's information at your outreach table, a little who's your representative bingo, right? Who is your congressperson versus who is your state senator versus your city council member, right? Give people a little reminder if you need to bring back some Schoolhouse Rock, themes there, that could also be fun. And then you can also organize your community for or against a ballot measure. So I don't know if there are any crucial ones this year in Indiana, but you can pay attention to those as well. Organizations are actually able to, nonprofits are able to engage for or against ballot measures. There's a little caveat there that it is considered lobbying when you do so. So you'll want to make sure that you've taken all of that into consideration. But it is a nonpartisan activity to organize for or against a ballot measure. So that gives you really just a comprehensive kind of smaller, medium size and larger activities that you're able to do. In the chat, are there any other, like, did this bring up any other ideas for you all? I'm just curious. Just looking. Oh, great. Thank you, Rachel, for putting in, yeah, the deadlines. Love that. Oh, great. Inviting legislators to tour your facility. Oh, yeah. I love that. Yeah. And even just making sure that, if it's candidates or if it's already elected officials, that they have the opportunity to get to know your staff, that they're maybe on your email newsletter list, that they're, invited to things. Oh, great. VitaSite. Yeah, printed registration, absentee ballot requests available. They're there. And sometimes just seeing it, even if somebody doesn't take one, just seeing it is that reminder, right? Our friends in communications say that it takes 7 times to see something in order for it to really stick. So even if, you set things out there and no one takes one, if it's in a visible spot, then that's one of those reminders to people to make sure they are at least aware that voting is coming up. Great. I see somebody else typing. I'm gonna hop to the next slide, but I'd love to just continue to hear examples of those. Great. Oh, Eric, we'll look at that question. We'll look at that question at the end. It's a good question. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the next thing I wanted to just present you all with and give you this example of is this making a plan for nonpartisan voter engagement. So there are some things that you'll want to organizationally just take into consideration. And so we've got a tool that we developed after lots of work with different organizations across the country. And we've really pulled together some of the just questions and guidance that can help you on your next steps for making a plan for voter engagement. Ready for the next slide. So the things you need to get started, we've got our ABCDs here, and to help you remember, and this really just follows along in the work plan template that we have that we'll share. But the first thing that you'll want to do organizationally is to assess your capacity. That is step A. Assess your capacity and your audience. So you want to get buy-in from your leadership, from your board. You want to make sure that folks are ready for this and that this is not a surprise to them. The worst thing, or a not ideal thing that would happen is you have some staff that start doing voter engagement work, and then all of a sudden you have a board member or you have a member of upper level leadership that says, oh my goodness, what are we doing? We can't be doing this. You want to make sure that you're getting that buy-in early on in the process so that they understand the value of this to the organization and to the community, and that the activities that you're doing are nonpartisan and are safe and are not going to, go against your 501c3 guidelines. So assessing your capacity, also assessing your audience. So who is your community? Are you engaging just maybe your staff and volunteers? There is no shame in starting small, that's for sure. Maybe your goal for the year is just, hey, we want to make sure that everyone on staff has checked their voter registration. That's a great goal. That's a very achievable goal that, at the end of that, you can check that box and feel pretty accomplished about that. If your goal is that you want to make sure that everybody who comes through your door, gets information about voting. That's a great goal. Identify how many people do kind of come through your door in a given week or month. Just get a sense of who that audience is. If you're working with primarily folks that are under 18, is there some voter registration? Is there pre-registration, or are there options to just do some of that education with younger folks? Or can you equip those younger folks with the tools that they need to get the adults in their life to show up to vote? Some of the most compelling voter engagement programs that I have seen have been young people who wrote letters to the adults in their lives, asking them, please vote for me, like in my honor, because I can't vote for these things, but these policies that these elected leaders are voting on are impacting me. So please vote, in my behalf. And like, how are you going to say no to a cute little kid with a letter to you? So just there's examples of things like that. Who is your audience? And even if you think, oh, my audience can't really engage in this, start to think creatively and see what you could come up with there. So assessing capacity and audience is that first step. And then building that basic knowledge. So I know that Prosperity Indiana and you all have great resources about the specific voting laws in Indiana. So please do get to know those, right? Get to know the mail-in voting laws, get to know what those deadlines are. Also, we have a guide. These updated guides are coming out at the end of this month, but we've got state guides that really walk folks through how to do a voter registration drive. And so the specifics around that, just if you plan to do a voter registration drive, where are the lines? How do you go through that process? What are the things that you need to document, and so forth? So building that basic knowledge is really gathering those resources. It also might mean getting to know your local elections office. You can show up there and start to build relationship with them so that if a question comes up from one of your community members, you have a direct line to the folks that have the best answers. So building that relationship there can be really great with your local elections office. Often they are thrilled to have anybody who wants to help people register and show up to vote. So often they're very excited to see you, and you can also ask them about, where are their gaps, where, what are helpful ways to get folks engaged in this. So build that relationship with your local office, and that basic knowledge of where to send people when they have questions. And then creating a plan. Start simple. I will say this 100 times over. There is no shame in starting small, especially if this is your first time doing this. It's much better to do something small and feel really successful about it. Like the 20 or so folks that someone said earlier in the chat that they got registered. They said only 20, but that's a really great number. And it's okay to start small with those goals, but set those goals so that organizationally at the end of the season, you can go back and say, wow, we set our goal at this and we didn't quite make it, but here's some of the reasons why. Or, hey, we really exceeded this goal. Maybe we could set it a little bit higher for next year. So you can do that evaluation and really get a sense of what your impact was. And then dates. So this tool that we'll put in the chat has some sample activities, but within a timeline that you can look at. Okay, I like to work backwards when I think about planning. So, election day, November 3rd, what do I want my organization to be doing a week before election day? Is it going to be those reminders about find your sample ballot? Can I go ahead and schedule some social media posts, or just start to prepare some of those for a week in advance? 2 weeks, a month out might be voter registration deadline, right? Figure out what all of those things are and match that to your organizational calendar. If you have an organizational fundraiser that's happening 2 weeks before election day, can you make an announcement at that fundraiser, or have information about polling places as people are coming to that fundraiser or that event? How can you integrate this work into the work that you're already doing? And looking side by side at those calendars can be really helpful. So it's matching those dates and finding the best fit there for your organizational calendar. And we have our friend Maria from The Sound of Music who's guiding us through all of that. Next slide. And then this is the links to those work plans. So we've got a Google Doc version, we've got a Word doc version, and then we have a PDF. So there are lots of options for that. Rachel, actually, could we pull one of those up? It could be the PDF version or the Google Doc version, probably, to just take a look at it so that you all have a sense.
Are you all seeing PowerPoint or the PDF?
We're seeing PowerPoint.
Okay, let me switch to this.
Great. Yeah, so this is the tool, and if you want to just kind of scroll down slowly here, this is really a worksheet that you can fill out, kind of a template in that way. So we've got some links. Here's your step A, assess capacity. We've got some samples here of community benefits and organizational benefits. So you can use these as some talking points as you're talking to leadership or to board, just as examples of reasons you would want to do this work. Can scroll just a little bit. Yeah, so choosing a staff lead, getting connected with that local elections office. Who is your contact? What's their email, their phone number? Can keep scrolling. Yeah. When are you going to talk about this next? And then B, building your relevant knowledge. So we've got links to some checklists, some other resources, some links to the Voting in Your State tool that has those guides about voter registration drives in your state, the county offices, all of that information. And then the C is the creating the plans. So it really helps walk you through, okay, who do you engage? What are some of the strengths of those communities, and what are maybe some of the challenges? So if you engage volunteers, for instance, volunteers may have flexible schedules and they may be able to go to that, farmer's market on Saturday morning when it's harder to get a staff member there. But a challenge might be that they do need a volunteer manager or someone to do a little extra training with them, but that might be worth it for your organization. But this tool kind of walks you through that. You can figure out how many people are coming through your door, a given week, or how many people are on your email newsletter list, for instance, are some of those examples that'll just walk you through. And then, yeah, setting data-informed goals. So you can kind of add all of those up at the end there. And then, yeah, step D is the dates and schedules. So I've got a sample there. That is, if you'll pause right here. So this is that planning tool that I talked about here. You've got election day, and kind of working backwards from there can be really helpful. And there's just some sample organizational activities that you can do during that time. This is an example. So it's not, the dates are not exact within there, but they're approximate within this. And then there's also links to a bunch of different tools that you can use as you're making that planning. And then below that example, that filled out example one is a blank form that you can then work on and fill out. So just wanted to share that tool with you all as you're doing this. I hope that that is helpful. If there are things on there that you're like, this is really great, let us know. If there's things on there that you're like, oh, you should add this part, I found this really helpful. We, again, get all of this information from experience working with nonprofits. And so also we welcome your feedback on this. If you get through, get to the point where you have some feedback or want to include another piece of this. We want this information to be really helpful for you. So that is the goal. Great. And that's the majority of my stuff. I will pass it back to Rachel. I know there's at least one question that I flagged in the chat, and there may be others that I may have missed. Yeah, I am ready. I'll share. I think the slides and recording of this will go out. I will put the links. These are the links to that tool. I'll put those in the chat right now. But there are other resources there as well. So I guess I can start with, I think the question, yeah, the first one about incumbents showing up for candidate forums. Most have been avoiding town halls. I'm curious, um, uh, Eric, about that, avoiding town halls, just incumbents avoiding town halls, as I assume what you're asking about there. Um, but I'll say in general, incumbents, yes, should show up to candidate forums. It should be inclusive of everyone who is running for the position whenever possible. If for some reason, if there's 3 candidates running for that position and 2 of them are not able to attend, would recommend that you either cancel or reschedule that event. You want to make sure we've got tools for this on our in our resource library, but you want to be sure that you're not, it doesn't look like you're just supporting one of those candidates. But in general, incumbents should be showing up because they're treated as candidates in that way. Are there other questions? And Rachel, if there's any that I missed here, please do.
I just dropped one at the bottom of the chat.
Oh,
and
perfect.
It looks
I
like
see.
Ms. Sanford is also writing one, so.
Oh, great. Okay. Yes. What would you say to anyone who is concerned their board would be reluctant to promote voting either because of politics or because it's not our mission? That is a great question and a very common question that we get. So I would say there are some talking points that are in the work plan template, and that's why we included them there, because it is one of the first questions that we get. I think it's important to look at kind of the bigger picture. If you're working with a housing organization, for instance, and the goal is for the people that you're working with to be housed, right? I don't know what the specifics are of, of whatever housing organization, but the goal is to make sure that they are housed. There are a lot of different factors that are going into whether someone has housing or not. And some of them are individual factors, and some of them are systemic factors and community factors. And so if that individual does not have their voice heard in our democracy, then they are not going to feel as empowered as they will if they feel like they have that voice, if they feel like that voice matters. So that from the individual perspective, it is important to be sure that our community members feel empowered and feel like their voices are valued when they show up. From an organizational standpoint, if you are engaging voters, it gives you this opportunity to actually often reach more people. If you're reaching out to the community and you're talking about voting, there may be folks that were not aware of your organization, but you are the organization at the festival that has voter registration information. And so they're coming to you because that's what they're looking for. You could bring more people to the organization. Also, it uplifts your organization as one that has a little bit more power, so that when an elected leader is trying to decide whether or not they want to listen to a certain community, if your community is showing up to vote, and if that legislator knows and they're paying attention to which communities actually show up to vote, they're more likely to listen to communities that vote, that show up. Our executive director has a great story about working for a organization serving low-income families, and they were in a lobbying meeting with that legislator and saying, we really want you to vote for this certain policy. And the legislator said, yeah, that policy makes a whole lot of sense. I agree with you on that, but it's me voting for this is not going to help me get reelected. Like, your community is not actually showing up to vote. And so what's the which is not the right answer, right? From not the answer you want to get from an elected official, but sometimes that is a reality, right? So the question is your community showing up to vote? And so that can be really crucial for your organization to have a voice and to have a relationship with those elected leaders so that you become the subject matter expert on housing, on food insecurity, on whatever topic it is. Great. And also I'd say this is not politics to the question about like, is this politics, right? This is about nonpartisan voter participation. This is not about engaging in any particular party or anything like that. Our lives and our work, everything is political to some extent, right? But partisan politics is where the line is for nonprofit organizations. Great. Let me look at a couple other of these questions that came through. So if you invite a candidate to your facility, would you need to invite all candidates in that specific race to avoid implication of an endorsement? That generally, again, not an attorney, but that is best practice, is that you would have to invite them all. Now, use the example of, a Habitat for Humanity, a build site. You may not invite all of the candidates to tour on that same day, but you need to give them each equal opportunity to show up, right? If they're showing up on if there's 3 different Saturdays in a row that, you're open to this, you want to make sure that you're offering all of those options to all of those candidates so that they have kind of equal opportunity there. So that's a really great question.
Well, you look at the next 2 questions that have come in. That idea of, engaging all of the candidates, I think is a really nice segue. So Andrew, can I cue you up or tee you up to talk a little bit about Prosperity Indiana's candidate survey and sort of your goals and aspirations for that this cycle?
Sure. And so for those of you who have been with us since 2024, you might remember that in 2024 was the first time that Prosperity Indiana kind of dipped our toe into this nonpartisan voter education candidate engagement work. And we've done so in part in partnership with the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Our Homes, Our Votes campaign. And so in 2024, we did our first candidate questionnaire, and we did that for candidates for that year, it was the governor, U.S. Senate, and U.S. Congress offices. And so you can see in the link that I included, this is our example of, we sent the questionnaire to all of the candidates, anyone who is registered, whether they were from a major party, minor party, independent, as long as they were registered with the Secretary of State, they got that survey. And you'll see that we got results from, both major parties for the governor's race, for example, for independents, for minor parties, from some of those different federal roles. And some of those results have helped us in the way that we've been able to communicate their answers. And from some of the folks who ended up winning those elections, it's been kind of instrumental in how we've been able to communicate now with those office holders. This year, we're planning to do something similar. We don't have a governor's race, but we do have both federal and state level elections. And it's our intention to send that questionnaire out to all candidates for U.S. Congress, as well as for the state Senate and state House offices. So we're in a process of coming up with what we want to ask those folks is going to be informed by our members' policy survey that we send out every year. And so the best way to influence that is to be a Prosperity Indiana member. So look in your inboxes in early August for that survey. That will help inform what we send out to those candidates. I also dropped in another example of some of the ways that we engaged with especially the governor's race in 2024. So we continue to shape the way that we're trying to introduce issues of housing and economic opportunity. using some of the tactics and strategies that Gwen has brought to you today. So thank you for being here today. We want to continue to refine how we're doing that work. Please reach out to Rachel or I if you have ideas and ways that we can incorporate best practices that you've done or ideas that you have for questions or issues to bring forward.
Thank you so much. I will drop Andrew's and my emails in the chat so you have them, and I will pass it back to Gwen for our questions from Haley and Jerry. And then I dropped one more in there because we're having fun today.
Great. I love it. Yes, if we add, let me get, I think Haley, I think I got yours. Need to invite all candidates in that specific race. Yes, is the general answer there. And then Jerry, you asked about how successful are canvassing events, any tips that make them successful. So there's a couple of tools that are in our resource library, and one is around just tips for being at, events. And it includes everything from, making sure that you're out in front of a table, that you're not just waiting for people to come to you. There's also some talking points and some things about, some scenarios based information and talking points so that, if somebody says, I'm not interested in voting, some ideas for how you might respond to that. I'll pull a couple of these up and share them. But I think making sure that if you have a team that's going out and canvassing an event, you want to make sure you have permission from the leaders, the folks that are running that event. I have seen folks run into issues where, if you just show up, but it's a specific type of event, it depends on your local laws. But so you want to get permission. You want to make sure that your folks are identifying themselves, that they are identifying with your organization, that they're very clearly nonpartisan, and that they know how to answer a question if somebody says, well, who do you think I should vote for, and that your volunteers are trained, or your staff or whoever are trained in how to respond to that and to say, nope, we don't actually, we're not here to convince you to vote for any particular person. We just want you to have the information you need to show up and to vote. So yeah, I'll pull one of those up. And then Rachel, yeah, your question, federal and state funding. Yes. Can you discuss, when promoting voting, if so, how do they do so while remaining nonpartisan? So in general, organizations that receive federal funding are able to do voter registration and all that. There are some exceptions that you need to look up based on your specific type of funding that you're receiving. There's some federal funding that actually does require people to do voter registration, requires organizations to do voter registration if they're receiving certain types of federal funding. But then there's other types. I am an AmeriCorps Vista alum, and I remember, and this is still the case as AmeriCorps Vistas, you're not allowed to do any kind of voter engagement work. So that is, there are really clear lines there. But in general, it is perfectly okay to do nonpartisan, just letting folks know how to vote, where to go to get more information, that kind of thing. But pay attention to the specific type of federal funding that you're receiving. Any other questions?
I'd like to clarify my question. This is Jerry. I was talking more about door-to-door canvassing.
Yes. If your organization is planning to do door-to-door canvassing, are you thinking with like, it depends on if you have a list that you're using, like of your specific, constituents or your community members, or if you're pulling a list to go of just likely voters or whoever. But there's all kinds of canvassing, just tips in general. I think if your organization, it's a larger capacity endeavor for sure. And we tend to work, the organizations that we tend to work with, and yours you all might be different, but it tends to work this kind of, we call it reverse canvassing, because if you're a food pantry, you have a lot of people that are coming in and out of your doors on a regular basis. If you have, if you're a health clinic or things like that, you've got folks that are coming in, and so it kind of becomes this like reverse canvassing kind of a thing. But canvassing for sure, I can drop some other resources here about canvassing, but yeah, in general, do it if you have the capacity. Yeah, member to member canvases. Yes. That tends to be a little more valuable. You get a lot more friendly doors that way. If you just like pull a list and then people don't know who you are, it can be a little bit, it can be difficult and just frustrating for volunteers. More so than if it's a friendly, if the folks at the doors, they're are likely to be more friendly. But yeah, great question. Let me share. This is our federal funds and voter registration guide there. So that's a good resource. And then I'll share the one about events.
Gwen, I'd be curious to know, a lot of the organizations that we have on the call today, they might have some, kind of like regular events that aren't necessarily, they wouldn't need to necessarily add a voter registration event, but they could add voter registration to their event. Could you talk a little bit about how you've seen organizations do that in the past?
Yes, great question. So we've seen organizations. One of my favorite examples is an example from Ohio. There's a community garden that was across the street from a school that did a bunch of after school programs. And the community garden began to offer some programming for the kids and the after school program and all that. And they discovered that they had some parents that were like hanging around kind of waiting for their kids to be done, and there was just this like built-in kind of audience, and they had this time that they could have some conversations with those parents, and they started to talk about voting, and a community garden and voting may seem like completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but they could start to have those conversations, and they started to have some resources about just food systems in general, and some of the city budgets that were related to community gardens. They started to just make some of those connections between they started to make it relevant, make the issues really relevant to the folks they were talking with. And I think that's where often we get stuck is voting seems like, oh, we're only talking about the hot button issues. But really when it gets down to it, folks have big feelings about potholes, right? None of us want to have potholes in our communities or, sidewalks that we can't use. And I think once you get down to talking about, especially at the local level, when you're talking about sidewalks and potholes and all of that, it's really hard to not find common ground there, right? Or access to community spaces for community gardens. If folks want to grow food and if they want to get kids involved in growing food, like it's really hard to be against that, right? Those issues, when we get back down to those like nuts and bolts of what makes our communities strong, then that can really be a connection point there. We've got another tool I will share here is the Why Vote tool, and it's one that we developed with an organization called the Right Question Institute, which does a lot of studies with young people in particular, and how teachers have conversations. But this one we developed with them, and it just walks folks through how do you have a conversation about voting? How do you make those connections between everyday things that people care about and want access to, and voting? So starting to make those connections can be really valuable. So that's one example. Another example, this is from our last webinar. We had Warm Cookies of the Revolution, a group that is based in Denver, but they do these really, really creative civic engagement projects. And one of them is happens at sports bars. And they'll, during a football game that's on, they will host, a watch party for a football game. And there's no conversation or anything in particular while the game is going on, but at halftime, they have a conversation about, they'll start to ask questions about, oh, hey, when did this stadium get built here? What was the money again? Which set of taxpayer dollars paid for this stadium, or what neighborhood was there before the stadium was built there? What taxes go into this? And you start to make that connection to a real life issue. Stadiums, there you go, can be really relevant. Yeah, there's I think they have a video about that project. I'll see if I can find it real quick. But finding ways to just incorporate that into the work and into places where people already are. It can be as simple as having, like I said, voter registration information right next to you. We partner a lot with a group called Vote ER that works with doctors and medical professionals and civic engagement, and they have these lanyard cards, and they have just a little QR code with information about voting on these lanyard cards. And it's a really easy thing that someone can, as they're getting checked in for a routine wellness visit, they can say, hey, just do you want to check your voter registration while you're here? Here's vote.gov. Here's how you can check that information just to be sure, because having a civically healthy community is as important as having a physically healthy community. And so they'll, kind of make that connection there. So finding those really unique ways that you're already connecting with your communities and building trust, and then incorporating, whether it's conversation or it's opportunity to just check that voter registration or to get more information about voting. Any way that you can just incorporate that into the work that you're already doing is going to make it easier for you, is going to make it feel more natural for the community, and is going to really build a culture of voter engagement and civic engagement and strengthen our communities and our democracy.